A crisp autumn morning in 2012, deep in rural Pennsylvania, 42-year-old Clarence Biddle loads up his pickup truck with hunting gear before dawn. It's a routine he's followed for years, an annual solo hunting trip into the Pocono Mountains, something he always looked forward to. As his wife, Reba, watches him depart into the early morning darkness, neither of them, nor anyone else, realizes this will be the last time Clarence is seen alive. What begins as a peaceful weekend excursion will soon unravel into a decade-long mystery of disappearance, deception, and an astonishing cold case breakthrough. The story of Clarence Biddle's disappearance is not just about a missing hunter. It's about a family's grief, a wife's dark secret, a community searching for answers, and investigators refusing to give up. 8 years after he vanished without a trace, a chance encounter on a routine traffic stop would blow the case wide open, revealing forged evidence, betrayal, and the long-hidden truth about what really happened to Clarence. This is a true story of tragedy and tenacity, unfolding step by step from 2012 to the ultimate revelation in 2020. I certainly thank you, my viewers, most especially my subscribers. We hold you dear to us. Thanks for your support as we keep improving and bringing daily stories you won't hear anywhere else. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. On Friday, October 12, 2012, Clarence Biddle rises before dawn in his home in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. An experienced outdoorsman and a hard-working journeyman electrician with nearly 20 years on the job, Clarence has planned a brief getaway to pursue his favorite hobby, deer hunting in the Poconos. Before leaving, he tells his wife, Reba Biddle, that he'll be heading north into the Pocono Mountains for a solo hunting weekend. This annual trip is nothing out of the ordinary for Clarence. He often goes hunting alone each fall, seeking the solitude of the woods and the thrill of the chase. That morning around 5:01 a.m., Clarence packs his pickup truck, Ford F-150, a sturdy vehicle that has carried him on many such adventures, and drives off into the chilly morning mist. Reba, 38 years old at the time, watches him go. She later tells investigators that Clarence planned to return no later than Sunday evening, in time to be back to work on Monday and not miss any family obligations. There's an understanding that he will check in by phone if he can, but cell service can be spotty in the mountains. Reba isn't overly concerned. This is routine, after all. Clarence is a responsible man, devoted to his family, and careful. In the wilderness, there's no reason to expect anything unusual. As Friday turns to Saturday, Reba goes about her normal routine at home. Perhaps she runs errands or visits friends, while Clarence's sister, Lisa, spends the weekend in mild anticipation of hearing about her brother's hunt. Lisa is close to Clarence. They grew up in a small Pennsylvania community where family bonds are tight. She knows how much Clarence loves hunting, but she also knows he would never just disappear on them. Lisa assumes by Sunday night she'll get a call or see a Facebook update from Clarence boasting about a prize buck or sharing a photo of the autumn woods. Sunday evening comes and goes with no word from Clarence. Reba begins to worry. By late Sunday night, Clarence still hadn't returned home. Concern turns to alarm. Perhaps Reba calls Lisa to ask if she's heard from him, but Lisa hasn't either. Clarence's phone goes straight to voicemail. An unsettling realization dawns. Something might be very wrong. Early Monday morning, October 15, 2012, Reba contacted the authorities in Susquehanna County to report that her husband never came back from his hunting trip. Local law enforcement, along with the Pennsylvania State Police, launch a search and investigation. Initially, they treat it as a missing hunter scenario. In rural Pennsylvania, it's not unheard of for hunters to get lost or injured in the vast forests. Search teams assemble to comb the areas of the Poconos where Clarence was believed to have headed. The problem is, they have only a vague idea of his intended destination. Clarence hadn't given Reba an exact spot, just north to the Poconos. The Poconos spans several counties and hundreds of square miles of dense woods, mountains, and trails. It's a needle-in-a-haystack situation for searchers. Over the next several days, volunteers and law enforcement scour state game lands, back roads, and hunting cabins. They look for any sign of Clarence or his white pickup truck, but no trace is found. No abandoned truck on a roadside, no campsite, no footprints or dropped gear. It's as if he vanished into thin air. As 1 week turns into 2, the search effort intensifies and then begins to wane without results. Weather grows colder. If Clarence is out there injured, time is of the essence. But absolutely nothing turns up. For Clarence's family, this period is terrifying and perplexing. Lisa desperately helps coordinate flyers and local search parties. Multiple searches, both official and privately organized by family, would be undertaken, but none would find any clue of Clarence's fate. Reba, distraught, gives her statement to police about what Clarence told her and when he left. She insists he was going to a usual general area he liked to hunt, but she doesn't know exactly where. Investigators have little to go on beyond her account. Behind the scenes, law enforcement also considers darker possibilities. Could Clarence have been the victim of an accident or a crime? They quietly note that no activity has been detected on his credit cards or bank accounts since the day he left, a possible sign of foul play or an intentional disappearance. They also observe that his wife, Reba, was the last person to see him. In any missing spouse case, investigators routinely look at the possibility of domestic issues. Did Clarence and Reba have any marital troubles? Was there any reason Reba would be withholding information? These questions swirl, but in late 2012 there is no evidence implicating anyone. Reba appears as a worried wife, and there are no obvious red flags yet. Weeks turn into months. With each passing day, hope fades that Clarence will walk through the door with a wild story of survival. By the end of 2012, winter has set in. The woods are frozen and largely inaccessible. Organized searches have ceased until spring. Clarence Biddle is officially a missing person, and the case teeters between an active search and a growing cold case. In the early months of 2013, the Biddle case took an unexpected turn. About 7 months after Clarence's disappearance, Reba brings forward a handwritten letter that would change everything. She claims she found this letter mailed to their home. But the key point is, the letter appears to be written by Clarence himself. In it, Clarence allegedly explains that he left intentionally. The letter's contents haven't been released verbatim to the public, but according to those familiar with the case, it suggests that Clarence was unhappy and decided to walk away from his life, essentially saying that he wasn't missing at all, but had left on his own accord. This development is stunning. If the letter is genuine, it implies that Clarence is alive somewhere, having chosen to abandon his home, marriage, and life in Susquehanna County. Such a revelation would mean there was no crime, just a man who didn't want to be found. Law enforcement must now reassess the entire case. Clarence's sister Lisa reacts with disbelief and hurt. She cannot imagine her brother abandoning his family without a word. Reba, on the other hand, presents the letter as difficult proof that her husband left by choice. One can only imagine her emotional display, perhaps torn between relief that he might be alive and anger that he left her behind. Investigators authenticate what they can. The letter is handwritten, apparently in a style that resembles Clarence's penmanship. Maybe it even references personal details only Clarence would know. It's postmarked from somewhere out of state. Ultimately, lacking evidence to the contrary, authorities cautiously accept the letter at face value. They have no body, no crime scene, and now a supposed message from the missing person saying, "I'm okay, I left on my own." As a result, in May 2013, the police did something unprecedented. In a presumed missing person case, they deactivated Clarence's missing person profile. Quietly, Clarence Biddle is removed from the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, active missing persons database. Essentially, the case status shifts from a potential unsolved disappearance to a voluntary missing adult, someone who doesn't want to be found. For law enforcement, there is little more they can do. Adults have the right to disappear if no crime is evident. The community is taken aback. Rumors ripple through Susquehanna County. Did Clarence really run away? Some speculate. He might have been facing personal issues, midlife crisis, debt, secret problems that drove him to start a new life elsewhere. Others, including Lisa, are unconvinced. Lisa voices her doubts to anyone who will listen. "My brother would never do this. He loved his family. Something's not right." But with the official investigation winding down, there is frustratingly little recourse. Reba, for her part, largely retreats from public view after the letter surfaces. Perhaps she grieves quietly, or perhaps she simply tries to move on, as the letter itself seemingly urges her to. In truth, this letter is a deception of the cruelest sort. We now know that the letter was not written by Clarence at all, but at the time, nobody realized it was a forgery. It accomplished exactly what the author intended. It threw the authorities and the public off the scent. By the middle of 2013, the disappearance of Clarence Biddle was no longer being actively investigated as a crime. It was, on paper, not even considered a missing person case anymore. The hunt for Clarence was effectively paused, leaving his loved ones in a painful limbo. For the next several years, Clarence's case went cold. With no new leads, police files gathered dust. From late 2013 through early 2020, Clarence Biddle's disappearance was essentially in cold case territory. To the extent anyone in law enforcement thought of it, it was as a puzzle with no solution. Or perhaps a closed chapter. Publicly, little was said. Privately, Lisa and a few others kept Clarence's memory alive. Lisa organized private searches in areas that hadn't been checked, and she spoke with independent investigators or non-profits that help families of missing persons. They held out hope that one day truth would surface. But as birthdays and holidays passed with Clarence still gone, even the most optimistic began to accept that they might never see him again, and that he might truly have chosen never to be seen. For Clarence's family, the period from 2013 to 2020 was an emotional roller coaster. On one hand, the letter raised the possibility that Clarence was alive somewhere. On the other hand, if he was alive, why had he not contacted his beloved sister Lisa or any friends at all? The letter felt like closure, but it brought no peace, only more questions. Lisa, in particular, struggled with a mix of grief and anger. If Clarence truly left, she felt abandonment. If he didn't write that letter, it meant someone else was responsible, and justice had not been served. Reba's behavior in these years is somewhat puzzling in hindsight. After Clarence was declared voluntarily missing, Reba stopped pushing for any further investigation. She did not beg the police to keep searching for a possibly injured husband, as many wives would if they doubted the letter. Instead, she seemed to accept the letter's claims. Public records later revealed that Reba made attempts to settle Clarence's affairs. There was even an effort to collect on an insurance policy in Clarence's name, something she couldn't do unless he was presumed or declared dead. This would later result in charges of insurance fraud, suggesting that as the years went by, Reba was trying to financially benefit from Clarence's absence. To outsiders, Reba's actions might have seemed like those of a wife trying to move on after being left behind. She relocated from the small Susquehanna County home the couple shared. By 2020, Reba was living in an apartment in Wilkes-Barre, a city about an hour's drive away. She presumably went there for a fresh start, away from the whispers that often accompany unresolved cases in a small town. Perhaps she found a new job, made new friends. But some who knew Reba back in 2012 quietly wondered if she knew more about Clarence's disappearance than she let on. Those suspicions remained unspoken publicly until the case broke wide open. Through these years, Randall Farrow was hardly a footnote in the case. In fact, few even knew his name in connection to it. Who was Randall Farrow? At this point, only those close to Clarence or Reba might recall that Randall was an acquaintance of the couple. Some described him as a family friend. Others later learned he had been Reba's confidant in the months after Clarence vanished. Still, there was nothing overt tying Randall to anything at this stage. He lived his life quietly, raising no alarms. No one could have guessed that this man would eventually be revealed as a key player in the mystery. Meanwhile, law enforcement moved on to other cases. Susquehanna County is a rural area, but it has its share of crimes and missing persons. Clarence's file sat in storage, labeled inactive. Investigators privately felt unease. Seasoned officers know that voluntary disappearance letters can be red herrings, but without evidence to contradict the letter, they were stuck. One Pennsylvania State Police investigator would later recall how the Biddle case always nagged at me. It just didn't sit right, but we had nothing to go on. That nagging feeling kept a small ember of the case alive in the back of some minds. Lisa Biddle never gave up. Every October, she held a small vigil on the anniversary of Clarence's disappearance. She and a handful of Clarence's old friends would light a candle, share stories, and pray for answers. It was an act of hope and remembrance, quietly marking the passage of time. Lisa's unwavering belief was that Clarence had not simply walked away. She suspected foul play, perhaps an accident covered up or something worse, but she lacked proof. All she could do was wait and press authorities occasionally to revisit the case. Year after year, she was told there were no leads. By the start of 2020, even Lisa had to acknowledge that without new evidence, they might never know what happened. Little did anyone know, the breakthrough was just around the corner. Sometimes justice sleeps for years, and then suddenly, one stroke of luck awakens it. In the spring of 2020, an unexpected incident in a neighboring state would provide the spark that Clarence's cold case desperately needed. It's now early 2020, and across state lines in New York, a patrol officer pulls over a pickup Ford F-150 truck on a routine traffic stop. The driver had committed a minor traffic infraction, speeding a few miles over the limit. What should have been a straightforward ticketing quickly turned into a pivotal moment in a long, dormant case. When the officer runs the truck's license plate, a red flag pops up. The vehicle is registered to a person who's been missing for years, Clarence Biddle. The truck's VIN number confirms it. This white pickup is the very one Clarence drove off in on that October morning in 2012. It has somehow resurfaced 8 years later in the possession of someone else. Immediately, the traffic stop escalates. Backup is called. The driver of the truck is detained, and the vehicle is impounded. The man behind the wheel identifies himself as Randall Farrow. At first, he claims he recently bought the truck from an online listing, but his story is inconsistent, and investigators quickly sense something is off. When pressed, Randall changes his tale, now saying Clarence gave him the truck years ago as a gift. The officers conducting the stop realize they have stumbled upon a major lead in a cold case. They notify the Pennsylvania State Police and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. Given the potential multi-jurisdictional nature, Clarence went missing in PA, truck found in NY. The Attorney General's office authorizes reactivating Clarence Biddle's missing person file as part of a broader criminal investigation. 4. Lisa and Clarence's family. The news is electrifying and devastating all at once. Clarence's truck has been found, and someone else has it. This is the first tangible evidence in 8 years that something criminal likely happened back in 2012. The cold case is officially hot again. Investigators from Pennsylvania rush to interview Randall Farrow thoroughly. Randall, now in his late 40s or early 50s, is no stranger to Clarence's family. He was loosely known to them, but the fact he's been secretly driving Clarence's vehicle is deeply suspicious. Under intense questioning, Randall falters. Bits and pieces of a conspiracy begin to emerge. Perhaps facing charges for possessing a stolen vehicle, Randall hints that it's not what it looks like. He suggests that Reba can explain everything. This cryptic statement prompts investigators to obtain search warrants for both Randall's property and Reba's current residence. The fact that Randall immediately implicates Reba indicates a joint involvement. Law enforcement suspects they are finally peering into what really happened to Clarence Biddle. In the first days of June 2020, a team of investigators descends upon Reba Biddle's apartment in Wilkes-Barre. With a warrant in hand, they conduct a thorough search of her belongings. Reba, caught off guard, watches anxiously as officers comb through her home office, closets, and storage. It doesn't take long for them to find exactly what they're looking for, evidence that reframes the entire case. Among Reba's files and papers, investigators discover handwritten drafts of a letter that is eerily familiar. Line by line, these drafts match the phrasing of the goodbye letter that Reba had produced in 2013, the one supposedly written by Clarence. Here were multiple earlier versions of that letter, in Reba's own handwriting, complete with cross-outs and edits. This was the smoking gun proving that the farewell letter was a forgery all along. Clarence did not write it, Reba did. For the investigative team, this discovery is seismic. It confirms that Reba lied to authorities and deliberately misled the investigation. Combined with Randall's possession of the truck, a narrative of conspiracy starts to solidify. Reba and Randall colluded to make Clarence disappear and then cover it up. In that moment, what was once thought to be a tragic missing person case with a possibly voluntary departure is starkly revealed as a likely homicide or foul play scenario. The realization sends shivers down the spines of even veteran detectives. They have been duped for years by this duo's deception. Reba Biddle is immediately taken into custody for questioning. Confronted with the letter drafts, she reportedly breaks down in tears, whether out of guilt or simply the shock of being caught, only she knows. She initially tries to explain away the drafts. Her attorney later claims that these handwritten drafts were merely part of Reba's emotional process, that she wrote them as unsent therapeutic letters to cope with Clarence leaving. But investigators aren't buying that explanation. The drafts are clearly early versions of the exact fake letter Reba presented as Clarence's words. There is no innocent reason to have those drafts unless she authored the hoax. As evidence is collected, forensic teams also examine Clarence's recovered truck. They look for any physical evidence, blood, DNA, bullet holes, anything that might tell the story of Clarence's fate. However, given the 8-year gap, any forensic evidence on the truck is likely degraded or cleaned. Indeed, reports would later indicate that no usable biological evidence was found in the vehicle. It seems whoever orchestrated this had plenty of time to sanitize the crime scene. Still, the truck yields clues. Perhaps bits of carpet or paint indicate it was stored somewhere out of the elements for a long time, suggesting the conspirators hid it on private property until recently. Investigators also find that the vehicle identification numbers on the truck had been tampered with, an attempt to mask its identity. And yet Randall was brazenly driving it with original plates when caught, a curious misstep that suggests he thought the case was truly dead. With Reba and Randall both in custody, the truth finally begins to emerge. In separate interrogation rooms, faced with mounting evidence, each of them decides to talk. We can imagine the tense scenes. Reba, perhaps trembling, finally admitting, "All right, I wrote the letter, but I only did it because—" Randall, sweating, blurting out partial truths like it was never supposed to go this far. Piece by piece, investigators put together a theory of the crime. Reba and Randall conspired to get rid of Clarence. The exact details of what they did to Clarence remain murky. To this day, Clarence's remains have not been found. But authorities believe that on that October morning in 2012, Clarence never actually made it to the mountains. Instead, something happened shortly after he left home, possibly even at his home or nearby, that resulted in his death. 1. Plausible scenario, as prosecutors later suggested, is that Clarence was ambushed. Perhaps Reba lured him into a false sense of security about the trip, and Randall was waiting somewhere along Clarence's route. Clarence might have stopped to meet Randall, if Randall was a friend who expressed interest in tagging along or borrowing equipment, for example. It's chilling to consider, but Clarence could have been killed that very morning before anyone even realized he was missing. Another scenario is that an altercation happened at the Biddle home in the early hours, and Reba and Randall then transported Clarence's body using the truck. We do know that no murder weapon was ever recovered, and both suspects have been cagey about the exact method of Clarence's demise. What is clear is that after Clarence was gone, Reba and Randall took deliberate steps to cover up the crime. They hid the truck, perhaps in a barn or garage, for years, and Reba penned the fake letter to throw everyone off. It was a cunning plan. By making it seem as if Clarence walked away, they eliminated any immediate suspicion of foul play. For a long time, it worked. With the lid blown off the cover-up, law enforcement quickly moves to charge Reba Biddle and Randall Farrow for their respective roles in this heinous scheme. On the basis of the evidence gathered, the forged letter, drafts, the recovered truck, and their own admissions. Both are arrested in June 2020 and subsequently formally charged. Interestingly, prosecutors face a dilemma. Clarence's body is still missing, and there isn't enough concrete evidence, like DNA or an eyewitness, to charge outright murder at this point. Instead, they focus on the array of other serious offenses that are clearly supported by the evidence. Reba Biddle is hit with multiple charges related to the conspiracy and cover-up. These include conspiracy to commit fraud, for colluding to deceive authorities and financial institutions, destruction of evidence, for any physical evidence of Clarence's fate that she helped destroy or conceal, likely covering up the crime scene or disposing of items, insurance fraud, for attempting to profit from Clarence's disappearance, such as filing claims on life insurance or the truck's insurance by falsely claiming a loss. Randall Farrow faces his own list of charges, reflecting how he handled Clarence's property and misled investigators. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, essentially theft, possession of Clarence's truck without permission, tampering with physical evidence for helping hide or alter evidence of the crime, for instance, hiding the truck and possibly other items, obstruction of justice, for his role in lying to police and aiding the cover-up that obstructed the investigation. It's worth noting that while murder charges were not initially filed, these crimes are very serious felonies. The implication of homicide looms over the case. Everyone understands that these charges are stand-ins for the murder that authorities believe occurred, even if they can't prove it outright yet. The legal strategy is to ensure Reba and Randall face significant prison time for what can be proven, the conspiracy and fraud, and perhaps leverage that to later get to the truth of the homicide. Both Reba and Randall plead not guilty at first, setting the stage for a court battle. The case becomes a local sensation as details come to light. The public learns how the beloved electrician who vanished was likely betrayed by those closest to him. The community's sympathy for Reba evaporates, replaced by outrage and shock. Lisa, who has been vindicated in her suspicions, attends every hearing, often with a portrait of Clarence pinned to her blouse. Investigators and prosecutors, now fully engaged, continue working to see if a murder charge can be added. For instance, they reinterrogate the suspects and search again for Clarence's remains, hoping one of them might break and reveal the location of the body in exchange for leniency. But neither Reba nor Randall budge on that point. Some speculate that each is protecting the other or themselves from a murder rap. Without a body, and with both remaining silent on that detail, a murder prosecution would be very challenging. The legal proceedings move methodically. Forensic accountants pore over the Biddles' finances, and indeed find that Reba attempted to cash out Clarence's life insurance prematurely, but was denied without a death certificate. Evidence supporting the insurance fraud charge. Handwriting experts match the letter to Reba, bolstering the forgery evidence. Investigators even uncover that Reba and Randall had been in more frequent contact around the time of the disappearance than initially known. Phone records showed calls between them late at night in the days after Clarence went missing, suggesting coordination. All these details build a compelling circumstantial case of a conspiracy. Facing the mountain of evidence, Randall Farrow decides to cooperate with prosecutors to some degree. In a deal to reduce his potential sentence, he admits to certain elements of the plot. He acknowledges that he kept Clarence's truck hidden on his property, a rural piece of land in a neighboring county, for years. He also admits that he helped Reba craft the narrative that Clarence left town. However, Randall stops short of confessing to murder or specifying how Clarence was killed. Still, his cooperation is enough to secure convictions on the charges he faces. In a dramatic sentencing hearing in mid-2021, Randall expresses remorse, though notably he frames it as remorse for my role in what happened to my friend Clarence, without detailing that role fully. The judge, unimpressed, emphasizes the gravity of helping cover up a man's disappearance for years and the torment it caused the family. Randall Farrow is sentenced to 14 years in prison for his role in the conspiracy. The court acknowledges that Randall was not charged with actually killing Clarence, but nonetheless deems his participation in the fraud and cover-up to warrant a substantial prison term. 14 years is a significant sentence, reflecting the community's outrage and the judge's view that this was an extremely serious offense short of homicide. Reba Biddle's legal journey reaches its climax around the same time. Unlike Randall, Reba, the alleged mastermind, fights the charges harder. Her defense attorney tries to cast doubt, suggesting, as mentioned, that Reba only wrote those letter drafts as a form of emotional catharsis, and that she truly believed Clarence had left on his own. The defense argues there's no proof Reba harmed her husband and posits that maybe Clarence really did run off and something unrelated befell him. This line of defense does not sit well with a jury, and it doesn't explain why Randall had the truck. Ultimately, facing the likelihood of conviction on all counts, and potentially even an added charge of conspiracy to commit murder, Reba strikes a plea agreement. She pleads guilty to multiple felony counts in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence and avoiding a murder charge that could emerge later if evidence allowed. In court, Reba gives a tearful statement that's part apology, part denial. She apologizes for any pain caused, but still stops short of admitting to harming Clarence. The judge and Clarence's family remain unconvinced of her contrition. Reba is sentenced to a prison term. Reports suggest it was on the order of a decade or more, similar to Randall's. While exact numbers weren't widely publicized, what matters to Lisa and the community is that Reba will spend many years behind bars for what she did. If Randall received 14 years, one can infer Reba's sentence was of comparable length, if not longer, given her central role and breach of trust as Clarence's spouse. During these proceedings, one crucial administrative step is also taken. In June 2021, a court officially declares Clarence Biddle deceased by legal standards. This court order finally acknowledges what everyone has known in their hearts, that Clarence never left on his own and is not coming back. This allows Lisa and the rest of Clarence's family to settle his estate, arrange a memorial, and bring some closure to bureaucratic limbo. It is a bittersweet moment. On paper, Clarence is now at rest, but in reality, his body has not been found, and that lingering uncertainty is painful. Multiple searches, both official and private, have still failed to locate Clarence's remains or a burial site. Reba and Randall, even when confronted, did not reveal where Clarence's body was hidden. To this day, it remains one of the unanswered questions in this case. One last cruel twist that the conspirators have kept to themselves. As the gavel falls on the final court proceedings, a complex wave of emotions washes over everyone connected to the case. Justice has been partially served. Those responsible for Clarence Biddle's disappearance and the ensuing web of lies are held accountable, punished for their crimes of conspiracy and fraud. However, the case is in some ways not fully closed. The fact that no one has been convicted of Clarence's murder and that his body remains missing leaves a haunting feeling that the complete truth is still out there, hidden beneath layers of deception. Investigators openly state that the file will remain open regarding the homicide. If any new evidence or tips emerge, for instance, if either Reba or Randall ever decide to confess the full story, or if Clarence's remains are discovered, further charges could be brought. For Clarence's family, particularly his sister Lisa, the resolution is a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief, because after 8 agonizing years, she finally knows for certain that her brother didn't abandon them. He was the victim of a terrible crime. The nagging doubts planted by that forged letter are gone. Lisa's intuition was vindicated. Clarence was loyal and loving to the end. It was others who betrayed him. But there is also deep heartbreak in knowing that the very person who should have stood by Clarence, his wife, instead chose to harm him, whether directly or by collusion. Lisa has spoken about the pain of realizing that her brother's trust was misplaced and how Reba looked her in the eye for years, feigning suffering, all while knowing exactly what happened. It's a wound that may never fully heal.